Welcome to a conversation with Richard Saunders. This is part of my video interview series for my Skeptical Inquirer online column. Richard, as some viewers may know, is the producer and host of the Skeptic Zone podcast. Welcome, Richard.
Rob, good to see you.
As I understand that you just went through a big California earthquake.
I got up very early this morning. I was watching a little bit of TV on a ridiculously big television set, and then suddenly it went a little jolt, and the TV set went wobble. And I thought, was that a truck going by? And I thought, oh, it's California. I bet that was an earthquake. And sure enough, but it was only a 3.5 or something like that.
Oh, so most natives wouldn't even call that an earthquake, right?
It was very quick. It was less than a second. It was just a bump, and it's gone. So if I start shaking at any time soon, then we're having an aftershock.
Aftershock. Sometimes aftershocks are bigger than the original.
Yeah.
I have heard that. So this is actually the second time I'm interviewing you. The first was a text-only article, and it was I looked at it 5 years ago on the occasion of your 500th episode of your weekly podcast. Amazing. As of today, I believe your number has grown to 775. I got that right?
I'm working on 776 at the moment.
Without a missed week? That's a truly astounding.
Without a missed week, yeah.
How do you do that, since you're the lone producer?
Dedication. Look, it has to happen. There must be a time where either I will miss a week or two through circumstances, or the show will stop. But for roughly 16 years, no, this hasn't been the case. It's dedication. You just have to commit time and effort to getting interviews, reporting, writing articles and stuff like that, and putting it out there.
And you even make it happen, though you somewhat frequently fly across the Pacific.
Well, the good thing about modern technology is I could actually do the whole show on my iPhone if I had to, from recording to editing to web editing to graphics. I do 90% of it on the iPad, and when I'm at home, I'm in California at the moment, when I'm at home at my own studios, I've got very good studio microphones to use. But for field reports and on the go, on the run, the iPhone, actually, you can get away with it.
Yeah, regarding interviews, I've done 2 CSICon worths of segments for interviews for the Skeptic Zone, and I just was using an iPhone. I think the first one was probably iPhone 6 or 7, and and the last one was 11, but still, even that was reasonably good.
Yeah. You just have to know what you're doing, how to use it properly, a few settings and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, the microphone technology has improved so much that, as I say, for a field reporting device, it's really good.
Yeah, speaking of which, the microphone has improved, and so has the camera. And it's amazing all the great high-def shots we have of aliens now, because everyone's got a high-def camera on the planet practically.
Well, this is a great point, and it's a point that I first became aware of some years ago, and I don't remember who said it, that millions of people are walking around with high-definition video cameras in their pockets, which they use continuously.
I would dare to say hundreds of millions. I would dare, even in the United States, hundreds of millions. Yeah.
And it just stands to reason that if alien spacecraft, and it's tricky, I use the term UFO a lot, of course, we all do. But let's get to the guts of it. People mean alien spaceships. That's what they mean. So if there are alien spaceships zooming around our atmosphere, buzzing people, looking at cattle, I don't know what they're doing, with millions upon millions of people having ready access to high definition video cameras, you would naturally expect to be flooded with real video of alien spaceships.
Uncontested.
It just hasn't happened. It just hasn't happened. And well, I mean, why not? If they're there, if they're crashing all the time, these pilots seem to be terrible, then we should have lots of video.
Yeah, a civilization that can make an interstellar spacecraft, let's face it, actually multiple civilizations, because they're all different descriptions of what aliens look like, right? and they can do that, and then yes, they crash, and lowly human Homo sapiens can capture them. Yeah, it's astounding. Well, all
Well,
right,
I
so
mean, you remember the movie Independence Day?
of
Was it
course,
20 years ago? I mean, we could beat them then, 20 years ago. The
right,
jet
right.
fighters were one-on-one with little flying saucers. That was 20 years ago with our
Well,
armed technology.
we had Will Smith, so and the virus that would work on alien computer system. All right, so if the viewers haven't caught on yet by this little bit of the conversation and the UFO over my right shoulder, this is going to be a UFO talk. The first time I talked to Richard for my column, we discussed his skeptical career in general and the podcast in detail. But this time, I want to talk about UFOs. I haven't really covered this in the time I've been a skeptical activist. So Richard and I have known each other for about 5 years and have worked together on the subject of psychics when I joined his great Australian psychic prediction project for a while. But I don't think we've ever discussed UFOs together. So I got the idea of having this talk with you when I listened to the last July episode of your podcast. It was all about the UFO flap in America because of the recent congressional committee hearings. And you did a deep dive on Trove, also into the antiquated term flying saucers. Oh, I wonder if UFO is going to ever be seen as an antiquated term. I refuse. I'm not giving it up. It's UFO. And at about the same time, you made a short TikTok named "Where Are the Aliens?", where you were walking around just ruminating about the unending belief in alien visitation without any concrete evidence. So, I decided that this has to be a conversation. So, from what I gather, you've had a long-term interest in this subject, and I assume that you were once a believer.
Absolutely, yeah. When I was a kid, because when I was
tell me about that.
Yeah, when in the 70s, and especially around the years of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the famous movie, my perception of the world and reality was that aliens and UFOs were here. It was obvious. There were reports, there was hype, there was movies about it. So, at that young age, of course they were real. And when I heard about people who didn't believe them, it was like, how can people not believe them?
What's wrong with you? Don't you
What's
watch
wrong
the
with
news?
you? And this is one of the things I use now as a great example. It's at what stage, after how many decades, do we say, come on, this great UFO flap from the 1970s, for heaven's sake, it's approaching 50 years ago.
Well, I would say it started with the literal, it was called Flying Teacups of Flying Saucers reports in the 40s.
Well, that's true. But my point, especially if I'm talking to school groups about it or whatever, is I say that when I was your age, people were saying that the aliens were here already. Or the great classic phrase of all time, any day now. I've written an article on this phrase, any day now. It's what police keep telling people. Any day now, the government will reveal the truth about aliens and UFOs.
That was a great article because it pertained to more than UFOs too.
Yeah.
It was all these other, this alternative medicine will be proved any day now.
Any day now, any day now. All the scientists in the world will agree that creationism is the truth. And it's, when you've done this for years, like I have, you can then look back and say, well, I heard it then, and I heard it then, and I heard it then, and I heard it then. It's the same with the UFO fads. They come and go. Now, we possibly are in the downward slope now of the latest UFO fad. I'm not sure, but I've lived through several of them, and nothing happens. And now, after living through several UFO fads and flaps and any day now, and nothing happens, and nothing happens, and nothing happens, you sort of gain a certain right to say nothing happens. Again, nothing happens. Empty promises again. There's a great analogy. You're probably aware of the fable of the little boy who cried wolf. Classic fable. Well, in this case, there's no wolf. Ever. At least in the fable, the wolf came. Right? So all these people cry wolf every 6-7 years, or whatever it is. But the wolf is mysteriously absent.
Unless the wolf is hiding as a reptilian disguised as a human being, which a lot of people freaking believe.
A lot of people believe lots of things.
Was there a specific thing you read or watched or something that turned your mind, or did you just gradually get out of it because of the time that nothing
Gradually, well, you know, when you get older into adolescence and you find other interests. I mean, this is all when I was a younger boy. It was very exciting to me. And then many years ago, and I don't remember the date, I saw a talk in Sydney by our friend Bob Schaefer. And he made such no-nonsense, straightforward points about UFOs. And one of them, I remember from his talk, was there was a meteor streaming through the atmosphere, burning up. And he said this was taken in, and I don't remember the year, let's call it 1960, whatever it was. I don't remember. And he says this was only in the sky for, you know, hardly any time at all. Yet 3 or 4 different people managed to see it, grab their old-fashioned cameras, film cameras they happen to have, and take photographs of this. And the point he made was, if these UFOs are buzzing around all the time and they're in the sky for more than a couple of seconds, even in way back before digital photography, you would expect to see hundreds and hundreds of photographs of these things. So that penny really dropped. And I thought, that makes such good sense. You know, that really does make good sense. It's a lot of the time, if you spend the time to talk to people about these things, a lot of people don't have any concept of the scale of the galaxy. Now, we don't as human beings, our brains can't comprehend it, but at least we have an idea. You know, through astronomy and science, we have, as best as our brains can understand it, an idea, whereas a lot of people simply don't have that. But people just assume, because of movies, things like Star Trek and Doctor Who and whatever it is, that jumping from planet to planet is a relatively easy thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. So before we get into that, because I actually have some ideas on what I want to talk about regarding why people believe these things, and I think fiction is definitely part of it. I want to tell my deconversion story, because I've never done that anywhere, and I don't think I've told you either. So I was also a true believer. As a child, I was worried about being tractor beamed out of my bed, right through the wall or the window, and everyone else would be paralyzed and not realize I was gone, because that was the stories in the books I was reading. The only thing that I felt a little bit safe about is I lived in the middle of New York City, and these things always seem to happen out in, the sticks, somewhere in Virginia, West Virginia, somewhere where, like, there's not that many witnesses to it. But I read everything I could find in the library, because there was no internet. I had to go there and check out the UFO books, which I think were in the science section. And, eventually I got one particular book that I remember when I started going through it, it fascinated me. I wish I could find this book, Richard. All I remember is every chapter defined the author was a multiple contactee, he claimed, and of multiple species. And every chapter was, this is the species I met with this encounter. He'd have sketches of the aliens, sketches of the UFOs, and they were different from the next chapter because it was a different species from another planet, right? And I was buying into this all the way. And then I get to the last chapter where he's talking about, how did they get here so fast and where are they? They have a city on the far side of the moon. And this book was written before there was human space flight, before we had ever sent even a probe around the far side of the moon. And I was into astronomy, and I knew that they had pictures of the far side of the moon now, and there are no damn cities. All of a sudden the switch went off. This guy is lying about everything. Maybe all those people are lying about UFOs. So it was like, it was literally a switch. Okay, I can't trust, In Search of anymore. And that really set me down, I think, a large part of why I went down the path of skepticism about pretty much everything. Because freaking, if you can't trust what's written in a library book, what can you trust?
That's interesting. That well, the talk I went to sort of helped a lot. And then I guess it was discovering that it was far more interesting to find out about the facts of the universe. And then I watched Carl Sagan's Cosmos.
Yeah, and
What's
Carl
actually
Carl
happened?
wasn't saying there were aliens here. Right, right.
Yeah, well, Cosmos happened before I saw this talk, but you know, it all jumbled together in my memory. But Carl Sagan famously said, paraphrasing, as far as he knew, there's a different extraterrestrial civilization visiting the planet every second Tuesday. As far as I know, there could be one right there, invisible in the room. But he said, but you know, there's no good evidence for
There's
this
no
opinion,
evidence.
and that's the key. And one of the things that a lot of people don't understand about the modern skeptical movement is we're not saying that they can't be here or they're not here. I mean, there might be a very advanced species who's figured this all out, who's got warp drive and coming along to have picnics on Earth. We don't know that, but we do need good evidence before we can say, yeah, this is happening.
So, yeah, so I wanted to go through kind of like a list of why you think people believe this after the many, many, many decades of no proof. Why is this such a sustained myth? The first category, I would say, are books and documentaries. So the last documentary I saw was just made 2 years ago called The Phenomenon. And you're familiar with that one?
You know what? I've got a collection, and I keep an extensive skeptical archive. I've got a collection of documentaries going back to the 70s, all with titles like "They're Already Here," "It Has
Yep.
Begun," "The New
Yeah.
Encounters."
I streamed this from a list on one of the services with, there was a list of, they're here, why the government's not telling us, all the titles. So, but I saw this one was recent. It might be the most recent one of any note, and I saw there was a Wikipedia article on it. So, okay, let me watch this. It included reenactments of a bunch of 20th century UFO reports, right? I mean, high-tech reenactments with CGI spacecraft, like, oh, this is what the people were seeing, right, hovering above them, right?
Yeah.
Each segment implied the cases that they were showing was an unassailable proof, and then that segment ended with, there has never been another explanation for this encounter. So, of course, being a card-carrying skeptic, let me Google this, right? So they gave the town or the year, whatever. I go, and most of them had Wikipedia articles with all sorts of alternate explanations, clearly saying how this could have not been a UFO or an extraterrestrial encounter. So, these documentary people don't care, right? They just want the views.
It's entertainment, and I realized that a long time ago. I mean, if I go onto the streaming services now, I can find more UFO shows, weekly shows and documentaries than I could possibly watch. But of course, it's a business. I mean, I've been involved in the television industry in Australia for a very long time. And you realize it's a business. It's shows don't have to care about the truth. They care about making entertaining shows that people will watch to get advertising dollars. I'm not being cynical. It's just a statement of fact.
It's the truth.
And they can do it very well. They can draw in crowds. They're not in the business of getting to the truth of the matter. It's a different business.
Right. And unfortunately, people watch that, and because there's no skeptical viewpoint, or a minimal one, if any, I don't think the show had any, there's no reason to not believe it. It goes, even more than when I was picking up books, because now it's on a television show, on a network, and look at this.
Yeah.
So then I looked at the Wikipedia article for The Phenomena, and there were no reviews. They got later added by the Guerrilla Skeptics and Wikipedia team, by the way, just to make the article better. But there are no negative reviews. Every review, I'm going to read you one. Tom Rogan, the national security writer for the Washington Examiner, said, "This is a subject that demands and within government is now getting serious attention." The CNN review said, "This is an earnest documentary that lends credence to the notion that the government knows much more than it has shared, and the truth is well out there." And those are the kind of only reviews. There was not one review I found that said, oh, you can look these all up and find out that these cases have other explanations. Not one. So now, not only do people watching the documentary get the understanding this is real, people who happen to subscribe to CNN or the Washington Examiner, oh, this must be real.
Something I learned a long time ago is I stopped worrying. These documentaries, even when the other week when these people are fronting up in front of Congress and people are telling me it's all over now, you skeptics must be worried. And as I said on my TikTok, just ruminating about this, I've seen them come and go. You know, so what? In a couple of years, people forget this. The UFOs won't be shown. The aliens won't appear. It'll just bubble along, and in a couple of years, there'll be a new UFO fad for people to worry about. Something else will be discovered or something like that. And I just don't, you know, it doesn't upset or worry me because there's nothing I can do about it apart from try to educate people, of course. But it's going to happen. People are going to believe in UFOs. It's wonderful fantasy. It's mystery. It sells advertising dollars. The best we can do is doing exactly what we're doing, is putting the counterpoint whenever we can. If the media are interested, and they're normally only interested if they want to have a believer versus a skeptic.
Yeah.
That makes for TV too.
Yeah, with the recent Navy UFO videos, that was on full display. I saw, you know, just randomly watching TV. Oh, there's a CNN report on UFOs. There's an ABC report on the whatever, and most of it is spent, you know, showing a loop of videos of unexplained UFOs, which, by the way, were already explained by people like Mick West, and this is a valid explanation for how this could be something normal and not an extraterrestrial spacecraft. And then sometimes they had Mick West on, but he'd get like, you know, 30 seconds versus the 5-minute segment.
The audience want to see UFOs, and they want to see evidence that they're real. That's the bottom line. If it was the other, if the audience was full of critical thinkers, then it would be flipped. All right, it's not. The vast population out there watching TV will cheer for the UFO believer and boo the skeptic. It's sad, but it's true.
Yeah, you know, Mick West gets hate mail, and if you look at his videos explaining what he thinks these things are, oof, you know, the amount of vitriol is quite amazing.
Well, it's a great indication because, and if you people watching, if you haven't seen Mick West videos deconstructing these famous UFO videos, please make it a priority.
Absolutely.
And it's a great indication that the media in general don't have the time or the will to do this because they keep showing these same debunked videos. Why? Because they look interesting and they just trot them out. Let me emphasize again, they don't have the time, they don't have the resources, they don't have the will. It doesn't make any sense for them to say before a segment, we were going to show these great pictures of UFOs, but they've all been debunked. So here's a picture of a sunny sky. You know, it's a business.
Well, so there are examples where there are people who went that way, although slightly different topic. You saw the recent post by the Chicago News, the daytime TV host who started his thing about psychics with showing about the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project and saying psychics are bullshit.
Yeah, well,
he just went right there. But that's the minority.
He's a rarity. He really is.
Very rare. So, you know, even trusted papers like the New York Times, undisputably one of the most trusted papers in the United States, maybe the world, right? As a journalist, Leslie Keane, who is a true believer, like she's published numerous times in the New York Times. And now just randomly, I keep getting, you know, promoted from YouTube. Watch this video, and it's Leslie Keane talking about why UFOs are here and the government's covering it up. You know, it's amazing. So,
well, here's another good point to make. This is why I have an extensive archive, and I collect these things, because in 10, 20 years, somebody, you know, some future skeptic can pour through these archives and pull them out and use them and say, look, 20 years ago, this is what people were saying. You know, here's this report. This is 2 decades later. Come on, you know. It's important to keep these things.
So how about we go back a little further than decades? So I have 2 historic examples of how impactful the news media can be to, you know, making people believe these things. So at the turn of the 20th century, there was a thing called the Great Airship Hoax. I assume you've heard of that, Richard. So for people who don't know, I'll say. So there were numerous sightings, not of extraterrestrials, just of human beings flying in flying machines, because there was no such word as an airplane yet, because planes had not been invented, but they were being talked about like they were on the drawing board and we will soon have human-powered flight. So people were reporting all over the report that there were flying machines with people who landed and talked to them, and there were no airplanes in the sight yet. So the newspapers would report this if someone said in a small town somewhere, and then you'd hear about it halfway across the country, and then somebody in that town would see a flying machine and have talked to the pilots. It's amazing.
Well, I mean, it also makes a good story.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, I keep getting back to this. There's some columnist. What's an exciting, interesting story I can write for my magazine
Right.
or
All right.
newspaper?
So we have to talk about this. There was one actually written as a satire. Now we're going back more than 100 years ago. This is 1835. I posted this on my Facebook site recently. I had never heard of this, called The Moon Hoax, The Great Moon Hoax of 1835. This was a series of stories originally intended to be satire, published in a New York paper, The Sun, and it convinced millions of people in New York and across the country that the moon was teeming with unicorns and a race of, I kid you not, bat people. People claimed they had telescopes and they imaged them and they were diagrams. A recent article I found discussed this, is where I found that, and explained why the stories were run and why they were accepted as real. You know, at one point they realized they were a hit and they kept going with them. And it was an interesting article because it said it mirrors the trends that continue and in fact are amplified today. If people want to Google it, it's called Bat People on the Moon, What a Famed 1835 Hoax Reveals About Misinformation Today. It was fascinating.
There's nothing new under the sun, the old expression, or on the moon, apparently.
Apparently not.
Again,
so, okay.
Great story.
So that was mainstream media. So now I want to talk about social media. This has to have exacerbated the problem. So just today, I typed in on my YouTube feed on my phone, UFO, just that, not even UAP, flying saucer, just UFO. And I took a bunch of screenshots just so I can go through it quickly. Why the government keeps UFO secrets. Multi-decade secret UFO program in the US. More bombshells. We just found a wormhole on the History Channel. I don't know what that has to do with UFOs, but another, this looks like National Geographic, full episode, UFO sightings at nuclear bases, why we know UFOs are here. The Pentagon releases shocking video of UFOs. Aliens are working with the US government. The History Channel, Richard, the History Channel. I can go on and on. It's like the whole feed is full of it.
I can hear the cash registers ringing now.
Yeah.
If they don't do this, Rob, there's a chance they'll go out of business. What do you think they're going to do? All right. So we're talking about, there are some serious documentaries out there, and there are documentaries made because it's a mill and it's entertaining. And I don't mind the odd UFO documentary. I think they're funny sometimes. They can be painful to sit through because they're so bad and the science is so crummy. But for someone sitting in their house eating their popcorn and believing in UFOs, they're probably wonderful things. There are serious documentaries out there. There's a new one being released called The UFO Movie They Don't Want You to See by our friend Brian Dunning, which I have seen previews. In fact, I can credit myself with being the very first cameraman on the whole shoot. I was visiting Brian Dunning, and although it's not in the final movie, what I did was I was the cameraman when he was making his pitch for funding, right? Please join our source crowdsources funding. And so I went with Brian to a local observatory, and we filmed up there. And I went with Brian to another observatory, and we filmed some scenes. So that was, what a thrill, you know, to play a tiny part. But I've seen the documentary. I've seen Russia's an early cut of it, and it's pretty good. I think it's one of Brian's best documentaries, and cool. There's an extensive section with Mick West, which is really good to see. So yes, there are serious documentaries out there about the whole UFO phenomena, but the number of faux documentaries or entertainment shows out there is vastly more.
So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I actually was a contributor, so I got a link to it, and I just haven't had the time to watch it yet. And also, I'm wondering if I should just wait because it's going to be screened right after CSICon is over in a public venue, and that would be great to watch it with a bunch of other skeptics.
You know what? You could probably watch it and watch it again, but yeah, to watch it in a room for the first time, I think would be pretty special.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. I want to talk about credulous celebrity scientists. Actually, I should make that singular as far as I know. Michio Kaku is a celebrity physicist, right? He's been all over the news media. I've seen him on CNN and stuff like that. He's written in text-based articles where he's interviewed. I don't understand him. He actually said to Newsweek, here's the quote, "Well, first of all, I think that this has been a game changer. In the old days," he's talking about the Navy UFO videos, by the way. right? That this has been a game changer. In the old days, the burden of proof was on the true believers to prove that what they saw last night was a flying saucer of some sort. Now the burden of proof has shifted. Now it's the military. The military has to prove that these are not extraterrestrial objects. So what the hell's gone wrong with Michio Kaku?
I guess it boils down to the inescapable fact that he's just a human like the rest of us.
No.
And we all can be wrong, no matter how educated, no matter how many titles we have. I don't have any, by the way. And it's a failing of his, I think, not to do his research before opening his mouth. He should know better. I would say he should know better. But I think he's more or less what you say as a celebrity scientist, right? I don't, forgive me, I don't know enough about his background to know if he's actually engaged in any serious research.
Well, he's on the older side. He may have been in his younger life.
Maybe.
I don't know his whole career on that.
But, again, even so, he said it, I'm not losing any sleep over it.
And by the way, he didn't just say it in like a fit of the moment while he's being interviewed. I've seen his own TikTok, and he repeats this repeatedly, and he shows the videos that Mick West has explained as the proof. He even said the Go Fast video, we can't possibly have something that breaks the laws of physics that goes through the atmosphere that quick. And Mick West has explained it's an optical illusion.
Technically, he's right. If indeed it was as, but what people think. I guess our hope would be that upon realizing his error, then he would, as a good scientist would, admit his error and say, look, I've found out this new information. Now I've increased my knowledge. That would be the best thing he could do, I suspect. If he cares to, if he has time, if it's of any concern to him, we don't know.
Yeah, so I've seen other sort of celebrity scientists. Well, one definitely, Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? And he's actually an astrophysicist, closer to space stuff than the theoretical physicist is, I think. And also Seth Shostak, who's the head SETI astronomer in the U.S. And both of those people are very skeptical. I have not heard them ever talk about Kaku directly, and I wonder if any of them have even tried to talk to him. I would love to be a fly on the wall in that conversation.
Diminishing returns, I don't know. Maybe they don't take him seriously. I'm just guessing. I really don't know. There are lots of celebrity scientists or people out there. I know I've had the pleasure of meeting both Neil deGrasse Tyson and Seth Shostak, and interviewed them both actually for the Skeptic Zone over the years. I think Neil deGrasse Tyson recently did make an error, and I'm just racking my brains. It was pointed out on some YouTube video that in this case Neil deGrasse Tyson made an error. I think it was about the curvature of the Earth and what level you can see the curvature. Okay, again, we're all human. People make mistakes. Get over it. The important thing is, if upon realizing if you'd made a mistake, is to say, "Oh, now I got that wrong, and here's the real explanation."
So so you started going down the path of Star Trek, and I wanted to talk about that. I think that's very influential because, yes, as a young kid watching that, I was, this is clear. Every planet the Federation visited has humanoids on it. How much do you think that has contributed over the years, where there's more and more and more of that?
So,
just people believing that, believing that it's likely. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer. I think what it's put in the general population who watch these things the expectation of this will be something we will invent, whereas the more cautious scientists tend to say this is something which we probably cannot invent. Of course, it is unknown. I would err on the side of this is something we probably cannot invent because the fundamental laws of physics and the speed of light and all the rest of it. But you don't shut the door entirely, of course. But to think that there are hundreds of civilizations just jumping in their souped up flying saucers to visit the planet 6 systems over regularly.
Right.
Now there's a possibility, of course, that as Carl Sagan said, they're here. They're everywhere. We don't know. They've invented this already. There's no evidence for this. So we've sent out probes to other parts of the the galaxy. They're just going to take a very long time.
Very long time, and going slowly.
And imagine
Right.
if a civilization 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 light years over did the same thing and sent out a probe at our rough stage of development, and by sheer unbelievable fluky dumb luck, the probe entered our solar system, which is, yeah, you couldn't even calculate the odds of just aiming something at the sky, and and we detected it. Here it comes, beep 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 beep. Holy mackerel! Look at this. It's alien technology. And how fast is it going? Oh, it's going this fast. Ooh, so it's probably been traveling for what, 26,000 years from a dead civilization. Maybe one day that will be the fate of Voyager. We don't know.
So speaking about, they could be amongst us. Have you seen the series The People of Earth?
No.
I highly recommend that. The writers are brilliant. They are either UFO true believers and don't mind making fun of themselves, or they're just people who did a really good research job, because the premise is that they are here, and pretty much any conspiracy theory you've ever heard about UFOs and aliens being here and amongst us is true. And this reporter breaks his car down in a small town because he got hit by a deer. He's looking through the local newspapers. Oh, what can I do interesting tonight, because I can't get out of this town? Oh, there is a meeting of UFO abductees. Let me go attend that. Maybe I can write an article about it for my paper in the city. And long story short, it winds up he didn't hit a deer. He was abducted by a UFO. And they show it later in flashback, while they took the whole car up into the spacecraft, and they have a deer-shaped battering ram to smash the front of the car, so it seems real when they put the car back down on Earth. It's like The Office meets the X-Files. They're all incompetent. It's like different species working together, but they have totally different personalities fitting their own planets. Yeah. It was hysterical. But it's like, I can imagine somebody watching that who already believes it. Oh my God, that's right. This is what's true, and they know it. Well, anyway, that's my recommendation for this kind of.
Let me say that, we are storytelling animals, and throughout human history, we've used different devices to tell stories. The ancients used gods, for example, or great heroes of their tribe, or whatever the case may be. In more modern times, we're using stories of aliens and space travel. Well, so be it. Wonderful. We're telling stories. That's what our brains do, and we love to hear stories. Let's read the child a bedtime story before the child goes to bed. This is part of what being human's all about. That's why I enjoy Star Wars. I enjoy Star Trek. I enjoy all the Blake Seven and all Doctor Who. I love it because they're stories, and they're utilizing our wonder of the universe and mythical creatures to help tell the story. Nothing wrong with that.
So the only way I would differ with that is I have met people where I think this kind of belief and what else it leads into, and it's all locked up. You kind of believe one conspiracy theory, you tend to believe others. I think it does do them harm. So there's a local fringe group. They actually have fringe in their name near me, and I've attended several of them. So some years ago, this was pre-pandemic, I went to one because I saw that their post was, they were going to talk about this was at the time newly, not officially released, but leaked UFO Navy UFO videos. And the gist of it was this author named George, and I don't remember his last name. He was going to talk about how this is all to prepare the population for the revelation, right? And so I went there. It was in a local library, and he had all of this, connect the dots, which weren't, nothing connecting these things. You're just making this up. But like there is like the movie Stargate. It showed that you could transport to another planet, and we have these things because it's alien technology the U.S. has, and we're keeping it secret. There is a secret space program that uses vehicles derived from crashed alien technology. We had a Mars base, not even just the moon, and everyone in this meeting was all into this. Okay, fun and games. They believe in UFOs. Then they got into, somebody got up almost crying that, and there's about 50 people in this room, and everyone is all into all of this. I'm probably the only person like looking around like, how can they believe this? And this guy is, basically upset because people maybe even his family, I don't remember if that was the case, but, die of cancer. And the US government is keeping these high-tech secrets from us just because they want to, suppress the fact about aliens on Earth. And people are dying of things they don't have to die of just because of those bastards in the government. And everyone was buying into this.
Yeah. Well, look, there's not, I keep saying there's nothing we can do about it. Of course, there's something we can do about it, but these people will always be there. They'll feed off each other. People who are susceptible to conspiracy theories and whatnot. It's not easy for everybody. I mean, I guess we're lucky in a sort of way that we've been introduced to critical thinking, and we spend the time when we look at the evidence, we think about these things. But getting back to what I was saying before, I think fantasy is good, and if it's science fiction fantasy and monsters from other planets, I'm saying that's a great expression of human creativity. I don't want to confuse that with the people who sincerely believe this is actually real, who can't divorce their fantasy and their reality. Of course, that's the conspiracy theories do a lot of harm. We know that. It's one of the biggest harmful aspects of our modern culture. Just look at the harm QAnon does, for example, ripping families apart and so on.
Absolutely. I know you've been to a lot of similar events, or at least in the psychic realm, but I had never been to anything like this, and it kind of freaked me out.
I said, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, I can't remember. I sat in on a UFO talk, and with my reporter from the Skeptic Zone, Maynard, he was sitting next to me, and speaker after speaker got up, and I swear they were trying to outdo the last speaker in how outrageous and far-fetched their claims got, from being abducted to being abducted by this alien, and there were 3 aliens. And I'm in this disbelief, and Maynard could see I was just losing it. And he said, "Come on, we better leave." Because I couldn't see if suddenly they were drifting into razzing the audience with these.
But they're being posed. Yeah.
I don't think they were. I think to themselves they were being serious, but you can't tell sometimes. You just can't tell.
Yeah, that's the whole thing with the Poe. All right, so let's wrap it up with, what's your opinion on the likelihood of there even being an extraterrestrial civilization with technology? And then, if there is, well, you already talked about kind of the second part I wanted to ask about, the capability and opportunity to visit Earth. That part seems to be pretty much off the table if we understand physics. But what do you think about the first? What do you think about the likelihood that other planets have evolved species capable of spaceflight?
Probably. We have. It's a big universe. The final answer is I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good
And answer. My guess is probably we could be the dominant species in the.
We could also be first. We could also be first.
We could be first. There could be many planets with single-celled organisms.
Yeah, that I have no doubt of. That if I was to put money and I had a bet.
Yeah.
There's
a lot of very specific circumstances that have given rise to us as a species.
Yes, exactly.
From the fact that we've got a moon, to the fact that I heard a great talk about this, that we have tides and all sorts of amazing things that led to us to the asteroid impact, to reach our level where we can send things up away from our planet is one thing, but to reach a level where we can send things not only up from our planet but to another system.
Yeah. Well, so we talked about that. That just seems to be
getting back to what we talked about
beyond the pale.
So yeah, to getting back to my answer, I would probably say in the galaxy, probably in the universe, more probably, but that's the best I can possibly tell you.
Well, so the Drake equation tries to figure this out, right? Within some bounds, there's a lot of variables of which, when it was first created, we knew none of them. In my lifetime, we figured out the essential probability of how many stars have planets. It's pretty much all of them. So that drives the number as higher, but we still don't know about all the other ones. And frankly, there aren't. I actually wrote it. I wrote for the Australian magazine, The Skeptic, an article on this very subject, which was also in AIPT Science, about what's the chance of there being extraterrestrial civilizations beyond Earth. And my conclusion after researching it a lot was not very high. And it's because of exactly what you were saying. Like Carl Sagan was big on we're just average, right? So therefore there are probably civilizations all over the place. But what science has shown more recently is that, as you were saying, how special, how odd the circumstances on Earth was. It took billions of years for anything more than a single cell thing to evolve. You know, multiple extinctions. The human race was down to, I think it was like 10,000, you know, specimens at one point, which one little flash flood would have wiped that out, and there would be nobody here talking. We wouldn't be on Zoom. So just when people say, oh, there's trillions of planets, therefore it has to be, I don't think so.
Yeah.
If again, we don't know, but I wouldn't put my money on that. If I had to bet either way, I would say it's less likely than not.
Well, if you're listening out there, aliens, please stop destroying crop fields. Honestly, what, you know?
And why mutilate the poor cows? Don't mutilate cows. Stop
and the cows, nah, it's all right.
Okay, Richard, I could keep talking about this subject for hours, but thank you so much. It's a fun topic, and I think we should end it here. Thanks so much for being with me. Take care.